In the Middle Ages, when the vast majority of people rarely left the village or town in which they were born, stories of adventurers who travelled across vast distances were rare. But they do exist, and the Bavarian knight Johannes Schiltberger was one such explorer. After 1427, he began to write down the experiences of his great journey, which he mainly had undertaken involuntarily. His journey was characterized by numerous twists and turns of fate that no one could have foreseen. His involuntary travels began with his capture at the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396, which brought him into the service of various foreign masters, under whose command he travelled the Middle East and the Eurasian steppe as a simple slave soldier. Welcome to our video about the travels of Johannes von Schiltberger, the German squire who rode across Asia in the company of one of the most infamous Turco-Mongol conquerors of the Middle Ages. His adventures will seem rather humble though in comparison to the action taking place in the futuristic world of our sponsor today, Infinity, a tabletop wargame that is now being expanded with its new N5 edition rule set and Operation Sandtrap, a battle box designed to bring new experiences for veteran players. It's the wargame where it's always your turn, in which the special forces of human alliances on the brink of war fight in the shadows in a state of near conflict known as Code Infinity. Now the world of Infinity is expanding, with 2 new factions available to play with Operation Sandtrap: the Shinden Butai, think Samurai in Space, and Kestrel, who bring a diverse selection of specialist troops. You can find out all about them and all the new developments in this tense future scenario with the N5 lawbook included in the Operation Sandtrap box. You'll also get 14 miniatures and all the bits and bobs needed to play with the 2 new factions. Plus, if you pre-order Operation Sandtrap between October 14th and November 3rd, you get 2 extra exclusive miniatures that won't be available outside of this window. This box comes with everything you need to dive into the new Infinity N5 game, so check it out via our link in the description. Throughout his life, Johannes Schiltberger recorded the battles and sieges of the armies in which he served. In the process, he gathered a wealth of knowledge about distant places, such as Baghdad, Samarkand in modern Uzbekistan, and even Siberia. He saw animals, people, and customs that were foreign to him, and described them from a peculiarly foreign perspective. As a self-confessed simple soldier, he did not have the time to delve deeper into the places he visited, nor did he provide a particularly scholarly account of his experiences. Nevertheless, the life he lived and the autobiography he wrote of it are still fascinating. It was only after 30 years that Johannes Schiltberger managed to escape from captivity and wrote his Reisebuch, or travel log, which quickly gained popularity throughout Europe and survives into the modern day. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, so let us start from the beginning. Johannes Schiltberger originated from the Marschalken von Schiltberg, an old Bavarian noble family whose origins can be traced back to the 12th century. However, when Johannes was born on the family estate of Hollern in around 1380, his branch of his family had already mostly settled in Munich as servants of the local duce. As a second-born son, the young Johannes did not have many options when it came to shaping his future life. His older brother would inherit the bulk of the family estate, or receive the appropriate endowment to lead a sophisticated aristocratic life. Johannes, on the other hand, was handed over as a squire to a knight in 1394, who was to further the boy's education. The knight whom Johannes served was the Bavarian lesser nobleman Leonhard Reichertinger. Like many other knights of the lower nobility and high noblemen of the late 14th century, Leonhard joined the crusade of the Hungarian king and later emperor Sigismund of Luxembourg in 1396. This endeavour aimed to drive out the forces of the Islamic Ottoman Empire, which had conquered much of the Balkans, and thus protect the borders of Hungary and Latin Christendom from the Muslim threat. Alongside numerous knights from Burgundy and France, Johannes Schiltberger soon found himself in front of the city of Nicopolis with the besieging Crusader army. During the famous Battle of Nicopolis, in which the creme de la creme of the French knighthood was crushed by the Ottomans and their allies, Leonhard was also shot off his horse. Johannes managed to get his wounded master back on his mount, before capturing a Turk's horse himself and leading his master to safety. However, in the chaos of the lost battle, Leonhard Reichertinger was killed before fleeing, and his loyal squire Johannes was captured and wounded 3 times over. After the battle, when Sultan Bayezid ordered the captured Christian knights to be killed, as punishment for the massacre of Turkish prisoners that they had previously committed, Johannes Schiltberger was spared. According to his own testimony, The man responsible for his stay of execution was the Sultan's own son, who had him personally brought to a group of younger prisoners who were also not to be killed, as the standing orders among the Ottomans were not to execute anyone under the age of 20. Johannes himself writes that he was barely 16 years old at the time. Thus, with his captivity, the involuntary odyssey of the Bavarian squire Johannes Schiltberger began. As a prisoner, the squire was first taken to Adrianople and then to Gallipoli with his fellow captured soldiers. These cities were of an unprecedented size for the young Schiltberger. He hyperbolically described Adrianople as having 50,000 houses, and the city of Bursa in western Anatolia as having 200,000 houses. It was in Bursa where Schiltberger was delivered into the custody of the Ottoman Sultan. Once there, Schiltberger fell ill from his wounds, but this turned out to be a stroke of luck for him, as he was not given away by the Sultan to other rulers in the Asian steppes, in Armenia or Baghdad. Instead, he was to become the Sultan's footman. As such, he was a servant, and always ran ahead of the Sultan wherever he went to show the importance of his master. It was through this service that John earned his commission as a cavalryman, a far more suitable position for a German knight. The use of foreign prisoners as soldiers was a practice used by numerous Muslim rulers, which started as early as the beginning of the Islamic expansion in the 8th century and was utilized in various forms right up to modern times. Besides his role as a runner, Schiltberger most likely took part in the Ottoman Sultan's campaigns as a foot soldier before he was granted his service as a cavalryman. Throughout 10 chapters of his autobiography, Johannes reports on the wars and conquests of Bayezid I, which took Schiltberger as far as Egypt. There he saw what he considered to be the largest city in the world, Alexandria. But Schiltberger tells even of battles that Bayezid had fought before Schiltberger's captivity. In these reports on his master's military endeavours, Schiltberger becomes more of a chronicler of events in the Near East and Central Asia than a classic author of a travelogue. His position as a foreigner is particularly noteworthy. For example, he reproduces all the names of places and people, or the sound of prayers, according to the way they sounded to him. He himself probably did not know their Latinized or correct local spelling. Ultimately, Johannes' service to his Muslim master was an involuntary duty. When Bayezid I's army returned to Bursa after a campaign, Schiltberger and around 60 other Christian horsemen met in secret. The men swore to flee together and appointed 2 captains to lead this daring escape. Shortly afterwards, they put their idea into practice and made a break for it. They were soon pursued by 500 Turkish horsemen and captured in a river valley. The sworn weapon brothers wanted to defend themselves on foot and prepared for their own deaths. However, the captain of their pursuers stepped forward and asked to negotiate. He offered to speak personally for the Christian slave soldiers in front of the Sultan if they surrendered without a fight, and would lay down his life to protect them from the Sultan's wrath if necessary. As the Christians wanted to see their homelands again, they accepted the offer. In fact, the captain managed to convince the Sultan to give the men a fair punishment. He had them imprisoned for only 9 months under rough conditions. Once again, it was the son of the Sultan, Emir Suleiman, who ensured Schiltberger was released. He and his comrades were released from prison, re-equipped, and even had their pay increased after swearing allegiance to the Emir. In 1402, Schiltberger took part in the Battle of Ankara, which pitted the Ottoman Sultan and the famous Turco-Mongolian conqueror Timur against each other. His master, Bayezid I, was defeated in this battle, and was taken prisoner by the successful first ruler of the Timurids. Johannes Schiltberger shared his master's fate and was also taken prisoner. Interestingly, Johannes describes the campaigns and battles of his masters, but says little about the role he played in the events. It can be surmised that his role as an equestrian warrior among the Ottomans and Tatars did not correspond to that of a Christian knight. This becomes all too clear in some reports about Timur. The next chapters of Schiltberger's autobiography report colourfully on the uniquely violent habits of his new master. In one anecdote, the German writes about how Timur, honouring a promise that he would not shed any blood in the city of Sivas, instead had 5,000 men from the city's garrison buried alive. In the same spirit, Schiltberger states that after the conquest of Damascus, Timur told the bishop to gather his priests and people in his temple. Hoping for safety in the sacred building, many people followed the command. When the building was full, the warlord Timur had the exits blocked and set fire to it. For the next 26 years, Johannes took part in the campaigns of the Timurids and other nomads. This was not a classic knightly life, so Schiltberger mostly remained silent about his actual role and actions during the campaigns. The Bavarian also reports on the deeds that Timur had accomplished before Schiltberger entered his service. For example, during his conquest of the Delhi Empire, Timur had camels and horses tied to wooden platforms and roped them down from the mountains into the valley. In India, when Timur faced down a force of 400 war elephants with manned battle platforms, he drove them off by driving into them with burning camels loaded with wood. According to Johannes Schiltberger, the Indian ruler defeated in this battle had to pay a tribute to Timur after his defeat and provide 30,000 troops. Reports on internal political conflicts in Timur's empire also found their way into Schiltberger's narrative, right up to a story about his death in 1405. After Timur's death, Johannes was handed over to his son Shah Rukh, who rode in the army from then on. Always dependent on the luck and goodwill of his masters, Schiltberger served different lords and rulers. Thus he served Shah Rukh and Miran Shah, the sons of Timur. After this, he was handed to Abu Bakr, the son of Miran Shah. Afterwards, he travelled to the Kipchaks under a prince of the Golden Horde, and in the end, he served a lord named Mandchuk. Although Johannes Schiltberger himself writes in the first chapter of his booklet that he set off on the crusade eager for war against the Islamic infidel, he later describes the various Muslim peoples he encountered with interest and understanding. This understanding also extended to the different non-Catholic Christians and pagans among whom he lived for a good 30 years. Johannes wrote Muhammad and the Foundation of Islam. In particular, he deals with the rules according to which a Muslim should treat Christians. Presumably this was because of his status as a dhimmi, a member of a religion that Islam considered worthy of protection. These rules most likely helped him to survive among the Muslims. Johannes also reports on the general treatment of Christians by Muslims, citing their loyalty to the faith as an important element in the Ottomans' victories. According to the Muslims around him, the Christians had lost their spiritual values, did not practice justice, and were more concerned with their material gains. Muslims, on the other hand, were very concerned about justice and treated even the poorest among them with respect. Nevertheless, Schiltberger never converted to Islam, remaining a Christian throughout his captivity. He encountered many Eastern Christian holy sites during his travels, but repeatedly affirms that, sadly, he could not report on them directly, as he only saw them from a distance. For example, as a slave soldier, Johannes never had the opportunity to visit Jerusalem, as he was with an army of 30,000 men campaigning at the River Jordan when he was in the area. However, with some pride, Johannes reported that he saw the Nile, Tigris and Euphrates, 3 of the 4 rivers that were said to originate from the biblical Garden of Eden. To his surprise, Schiltberger repeatedly found various Christian groups in Central Asia. In one anecdote, he describes a man in the land of the Kipchaks who recited the Lord's Prayer to him in their language, which he reproduces in his book. The German also described many other nomadic customs, attesting to how his Tartar comrades would drink the blood of their horses when there was a lack of food, or prepared their meat by putting it under the saddle while riding when there was no time to grill it. According to Schiltberger, the only grain known to the people in large parts of Central Asia was millet. Bread, as it was eaten in Europe, was unknown there. One impressive scene that Johannes was said to have witnessed was the revenge of the wife of a murdered Tartar prince. The widow, named Sada Melik, was said to have travelled with 300,000 virgins to the rulers Ediki and Zegra, who promised to avenge her husband with her. Her husband's murderer was captured in a battle and beheaded by Sada Melik. Johannes Schiltberger was also the first European to write about the people of Siberia. He reports that some of these people were extremely hairy. In this, he may have been picking up on a widespread stereotype, or he may have misunderstood his translators and mistook their description of a robust winter garment made of fur as a description of a person covered in fur. One Siberian practice the Bavarian found particularly odd was the custom of using dogs to pull sleds and carts. These dogs were said to be extremely large and also sometimes a source of food for the locals. Schiltberger also reports on the Armenians, as he had spent a lot of time in the kingdoms of Armenia. Here he talks about their religious practices and how they differed from Latin Catholicism, as well as explains from his perspective the origins of the rivalry between the Armenian and Byzantine Greek churches. Schiltberger further describes the Armenians as a very loyal and intelligent people. In addition, the Armenians were very fond of the Germans, and therefore welcomed him warmly, even trying to teach him their language. Finally, Johannes states that the Armenians made better textiles than the pagans he had encountered. Despite how many wondrous places he travelled and new experiences he enjoyed, Johannes Schiltberger always wanted to return home. Thus, when he was with his last master, Mandchuk, in the city of Poti in Georgia, he made another attempt to escape. Together with 4 other Christians, he fled on horseback and rode along the sea towards a mountain range. During their flight, the Christians then spotted a Christian ship on the shores of the Black Sea. In order to be accepted by the crew, Schiltberger and the others first had to recite various Christian prayers to prove that they were fellow Christians. After this, their escape was won, and a few days later they reached Constantinople, where the patriarch of the city took care of them. From Constantinople, Schiltberger returned to his hometown of Munich, where he found his livelihood as chamberlain at the court of Duke Albrecht III of Bavaria Munich and wrote his travelogue. In the end, Johannes Schiltberger's journey came to a successful conclusion. It provided posterity with this exciting report about his foreigner's perspective on events and life in the Near East and Central Asia. Johannes Schiltberger's report is particularly informative due to its simple description of his own experience and the knowledge he acquired, and is not characterized by praise of a ruler or intellectual precepts. Due to his status as a prisoner, he is also less Eurocentric in many parts of his report than many of his compatriots. It is the account of a simple soldier who had involuntarily fallen into the service of foreign masters and struggled through his life. Johannes Schiltberger and the interest of his contemporaries in his work show that the late medieval man was also characterized by a curiosity about the world and had a great interest in knowledge beyond stereotypes about savages, heathens, and monsters. Johannes Schiltberger was not the only German war traveller of the late Middle Ages who crossed the borders of Latin Christian Europe, and more videos about the travels of late medieval German knights are on the way. To make sure that you don't miss them, please consider liking, commenting and sharing. It helps immensely. Our videos would not be possible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links down in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.